serving as the Chief Executive Officer of Canal Alliance. Thank you so much, Omar, for your dedicated service and for being here today. After Omar will be Ricardo Huerta-Niño. Ricardo is a consultant in urban planning and philanthropy, working for city governments, nonprofits, and foundations in a range of areas, including community development, civic engagement, strategic planning, immigrant rights, environmental justice. He is a faculty member at UC Berkeley in the City and Regional Planning and International and Area Studies, where he teaches urban planning and international development. Thank you so much, Ricardo, for being here today. And last but not least, we have Colin. Colin is San Rafael's Vice Mayor and has been on the San Rafael City Council since January 2013. Since joining the council, Kate has focused on a variety of issues, including homelessness, housing, improving resident engagement, sustainability, local transportation, and supporting the work of the Census 2020 to ensure that everyone gets counted. Most recently, Kate has been deeply involved in helping our community respond to the impact of COVID-19. She is committed to working collaboratively with our residents to address the current challenges that we are facing. Thank you so much, Kate, for your service, and thank you for being here today. Omar, you can take the floor now.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to just to thank Marin Latino leaders for organizing the event and creating the space to talk about something that is affecting the lives of our families, friends, co-workers, and neighbors. Let me start with a bit of context to better understand what is happening in the canal. The impact of COVID-19 in the canal is nothing accidental. Latinos make up 16% of Marin's population, but account for 71% of COVID-19 cases in the county, according to Marin County surveillance data. And that has been the case for weeks. We got close to be the 80% of that just a few weeks ago. But to better understand this issue, I'm gonna go back in time to remember what Latinos faced before COVID-19. You guys remember the Race Count report, a report that analyzed demographic data on wealth, education, criminal justice, and other topics. That report identified Marin as the county with the highest racial disparities of any county in California. Disparities in home ownership rates and housing costs between whites and blacks and Latinos were a predominant factor leading to Marin's ranking. So we did have a housing crisis before COVID-19. Everyone knows the academic achievement creates opportunities and brings economic vitality to our lives. But Latinos were not succeeding in our public education system prior to COVID-19. And as the Latino population grew in Marin, the poverty levels also increased. In fact, Latinos were poorer than 2010. So we had an education crisis before COVID-19. Latinos are the essential workers for the county. They have been the essential workers before, during, and most likely post-COVID-19. And these are the essential workers who don't have the luxury of working from home and can afford to leave or lose their jobs in an effort to mitigate the risk of getting sick. Many of them lack of healthcare coverage, access to living wages, or sick leave. We have all been affected by COVID-19, but Latinos are one of the groups that has been hardest hit by pay cuts and job losses. So we had an equity crisis before COVID-19. So let me go back to my starting point. What's happening in the canal is not accidental. It reflects the historical inequities that our county, our cities, our society have had for a long time. So the solution to this complex issue requires a collective response that includes increase in allocation of resources and the implementation of local, state, and federal policies. My final thought before we go to the presentation that Ricardo has prepared for you that describes the strategy the Canal Alliance is leading among other organizations. If we want to reopen the economy safely, if we want to reopen the schools safely, we must make sure that we solve the problems of our essential workers. Our essential workers are the engine of our economy. Thank you again for the presentation, for the invitation to be here. I'm gonna let Ricardo to continue the presentation, and I'm open to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. And Ricardo, you could share your screen. If you want, Ricardo, you can share your screen so you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Can you double check that for me? I'm being told I cannot.
Okay, let me just go here and try to, let's see.
Hugo, thank you for letting me know. I didn't check the chat until now. This is an off comment, sorry. But if you could,
I think you should be able to do that now.
ah, there it is. Okay, let's see. One second, everybody. Saga, will you let me know if you can see it, when you can see it?
Yes. All right, I think we're, there we go.
Yeah.
Got it. Yep, we can see it.
Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very excited to be here with you. I just have to admit that going after Omar and his leadership, you know, his example and everything, it's just a little intimidating. And they said, oh, you're going to talk at a luncheon with some Latino leaders. And I was very excited, obviously. I just didn't realize how formal this is. So my presentation is not that formal. I'm just here to talk about what's happening, what we're doing, and hopefully that matches your sensibilities. Next time I know to be a little more formal. I see there's like elected officials and the police is on too. And you'll have to excuse me because we're all dealing with pandemic tech stuff. Anyway, so let me just jump right in. So as Omar said, I'm a consultant. I teach city planning at Berkeley, and they brought me on board to do some various work on the general plan. And this opportunity or this emergency emerged, and he brought me on board to help me to respond to it. Just have to figure out the best way to do it. So I just want to recognize that initially the call, you know, went out to a couple of partners. Canal Alliance reached out to Legal Aid of Marin and Community Action Marin to see what needed to be done. It's folks who are, in addition to other folks, but folks who are very much working on these issues that are related. So as we know, the pandemic issues involved economic development, they involved economic well-being, they involve health, they involve housing. And recently I've been on some calls how we're trying to figure out what's happening and how preventing health issues, healthcare issues, in fact, are violence prevention issues in some communities. And so we need to be sort of much more comprehensive about the approach, which is reflected in how we were able to respond. So just very briefly, I have 5 different areas that I'd like to cover. So Omar already gave you a context, but I'll share with you some of the figures that we initially began with, which kind of gave the impulse for this response. Then I'll describe to you our initial action, this open letter and the partnerships that we built. Then I'll describe to you where we are now in our request for a policy task force for Marin County. And what the next steps are, including a campaign for sustained action and attention, and then we'll wrap it up with the discussion and allow you to ask questions. I'd like to get to number 5 more quickly than I normally would. I just would like for us to be able to engage with you and be responsive to your questions and have the conversation be guided by what you may not know. I assume a lot of you are already aware of a lot of the material that I'll cover up front, and so please bear with me. So as Omar mentioned, at one point, Latinos were 80% of the cases with just 16% of the population. that's the worst, the largest racial disparity in the Bay Area. It's very significant. Over half of the county's cases were concentrated in the canal, and that's why the focus is on the canal, simply because it is where the cluster is. And if you are able to manage a cluster and address the cluster quickly and effectively, you manage to contain it. And so that's why we're really focused on the canal, not to the exclusion of other parts of the county or even the North Bay in general, the Bay Area in general, but simply to say that this is where the cluster is, and if we contain that, we can contain the spread. They had a positivity rate of about 20%, 3 times the county average at the point when we first started this project. We also recognized that there are socioeconomic factors. We are very well aware of these that increase the risk for Latinos. So access to healthcare, being low income, having an inability to stop work, you have to keep working, having pre-existing health conditions, and the dense living conditions. Let me just try one thing real quick. Sorry, everybody. I think that might be better. Aha. We also recognize that the context in which this is all happening is that there's that nonprofits and support organizations are really overextended, including things like food pantries, seeing 3 times the usual participants. You know, the already strapped and stressed social network, support network that exists just got compounded with all of these other contexts. So again, stuff that you all probably know. Some of you may know some of this, may not know the other, but we know that there is a deep need here. And then lastly, this fact about how many undocumented folks live in Marin. It's estimated 14 to 15,000 folks who are not eligible even to ask for federal financial support, and those who might be eligible just afraid of how that might impact their immigration status now or in the future. So lots of deep need. So in this context, then the leadership stepped up and decided that what we needed to do was to bring more attention. Now this, I want to say this very clear and very much upfront, that that we recognize the extensive effort and resources and leadership that has been deployed and was deployed at that point from local leadership. We know that there's lots of efforts, and yet, and this is our main point, and yet we had this great disparity, this great racial identity disparity with this community. So something hasn't been really working. And so our point is to say what needs to be different, what more needs to be done, how do we change our programs, how do we adapt to the local need, the local context. And I'll mention this and I'll say it again later, but on an initial call, staff on local officials' office mentioned that his family was from the canal and that his family was not receiving the information that they needed around all of the issues around COVID. So that was very, it's anecdotal, but very much our point is to say, why are folks not getting this information? Why are the efforts that are being deployed now not enough, and why do we continue to see this disparity? So again, recognizing that there's a lot of work being done, and then also recognizing that these numbers don't lie. There's something going on that we're not actually doing well enough, and what can we do instead? So as a response to that, we sent this letter via email on August 14th to the mayor, to the City Council of San Rafael, and to the boards of supervisors of the county. We also, and you'll see the letter to the right. I think most of you, if not all of you, have already received that letter, and if you haven't, please reach out. We're happy to share it with you. And we also copied all these higher level elected officials that you see in this CC list. And what we called for was what I just described to you. We want some new action. We want to support a new effort, a renewed effort, an innovative effort to be more responsive to what's happening in the community. To our pleasant surprise, they responded right away, and we got on a phone call with a lot of folks, some of the folks that you see listed as the addressees, and had very positive response. And so we were given the task to come up with an approach. What are the priorities? What are the areas of work that we would like to see the local official support. And our thought was, and I want to say this up front too, is we see this as a multi-pronged, multi-sector approach that we want to be in partnership with the city. That is to say, it's not just this call to like, hey, there's this problem, fix it. In fact, our communication is, can we help roll up our sleeves and work with you in partnership to figure out how to get this done? And so again, it's not just please fix it. It is, how do we partner with you? What resources, what can we do as nonprofits and community members to be a part of this solution? So the vision was a private-public nonprofit partnership. So the public sector would be the city, the county, maybe the state agencies would be a part of the partnership. And private, we have partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, who signed on to the letter as well, representing small businesses, local businesses, and rental and commercial property owners. So what we know is if we're not able to pay the rent, that the owners of those properties are going to suffer as well. And if they suffer, that we won't have that recovery. So our message has always been, we can't recover without our most impacted communities having the support. They are the basis of the economy, the basis of many key sectors, economic sectors in the area. Without them, we won't recover. But by the same token, without supporting local businesses, rental property, commercial property owners, same thing, we won't be able to achieve that recovery effectively or in a timely fashion. And then lastly, of course, is the nonprofit collaborative folks that signed on to this letter, led by these three groups together. And so I want to highlight and emphasize this idea that we are thinking about this in a holistic approach, and that we want to make sure that we don't villainize property owners. They're suffering as well. Our thought is that we would like to distribute more equitably the pain that folks are suffering in the community, because right now the folks who are suffering the greatest are the ones who are most impacted and least resourced to be able to withstand this major storm of a pandemic. I'm moving quickly, but I'm hoping to get through it so we can really engage in the conversation. In discussions with the folks that I mentioned to you, the Chamber of Commerce and the various nonprofits, and hearing from city and county officials in our conversation, we decided that we wanted to focus on three priority areas in the short term. So our vision for this project is not just what's happening in the pandemic. We know that the socioeconomic political conditions that have driven the racial disparities and the impact are in fact longstanding. They're historic, there's longstanding. And so if we're going to really recover, there's the short-term recovery of people being protected from the virus. There's also the short-term recovery of housing and jobs and income, but there's the long-term recovery of looking at these systems that have driven the possibility of this disparity. This disparity is very much concentrated in low-income, immigrant communities, English as a second language, some undocumented, some not. So we know that there's those factors. So this is the short term that will feed into the long term. And at some point, if you're interested, we'd love to share with you our plans, our efforts, and our vision for a neighborhood-specific plan that we're working on with the city to develop a very specific approach to how to do economic and community development in the canal that's sustainable. So these are the three areas. Within health, again, we recognize there's just a lot of work already being done. We just wanted to highlight what the priorities are for our collaborative. I won't go into detail on these lists because they are pretty long. I'm happy to go back if folks want to go back to it. When the letter is ready, and we expect that letter to be ready very soon, it's going to be an open letter to be able to share with folks. And Omar will jump in any moment that I'm mistaken in my planning. So mental health, social services, increased support, sustained support, and then this post-pandemic planning. We know that increased violence is happening, domestic violence and community violence is happening. We know that there is trauma related to the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic and staying home. And we know that depression. So these are very clear impacts that we need to be doing for immediately, and then planning for long-term recovery. We heard again, lots and lots of folks saying we need testing, more frequent, more convenient, and rapid results, especially for those most impacted. So bringing double down our efforts in the canal. Wherever there's a cluster, really ramping up testing, whether that's Canal now and maybe in the midterm, another cluster comes up, we're ready to deploy resources for testing. The other area was housing. Of course, this is like the extensive issue for everybody. If you have income, you can't pay your rent. So there's a long list of this. And so all of these lists are informed by and shaped by existing efforts and the contributions of our partners, experts in this field, including the folks that I've mentioned so far. So as you notice, things like improving and the existing stock, holding on to it, helping nonprofits have greater impact and greater participation in providing affordable housing, low-income housing, providing legal representation, stopping evictions, aiming for rent stabilization, loan programs to pay back the rent, converting the rental debt into consumer debt. So lots of innovations and ideas about how do we address this with folks, again, in partnership with property owners. So the last item there is we are also interested in making sure that property owners, rental and residential and commercial, are part of the solution, are part of the support that we're going to think about, are part of the planning. And so this list comes from our partners in the Chamber of Commerce who represent those interests and want to make sure that it's a holistic approach. And lastly, drawing again from the Chamber of Commerce, their leadership and their existing work, this list comes mostly from them. They also said they want better testing, more testing, rapid results, because their employees need to have that information so that they know that they're clear to keep working. And if they're not, then they also want that support, as you'll see in this list. So the second item is to help protect employees who test positive. So Chamber of Commerce businesses recognize this holistic approach already, and they're saying, not only do we need testing for us, we need testing for our employees, and we need to support them when they come back positive. It's not just like, oh, you're positive, go home, and who knows what's going to happen to you, but really building in that support. More options for quarantine, where people can quarantine, more funding for income support, providing support for sick pay and holding on to people's jobs if they get quarantined, business loans, more multilingual resources for businesses, and childcare. So for their employees and for them, even business owners, childcare support. As you see, that last item there includes this gender intersectionality of gender in there to say women-owned businesses, because of the childcare burden being gendered, that's an issue as well. So item number 4, we're launching, we're in tandem with our letters and our communication with elected officials, these open letters. We're also launching an online campaign to bring awareness that this is happening, that there is a collaboration of a lot of nonprofit organizations in partnership with city and county officials, in partnership with the business community, that leadership is stepping up from multi-sector perspective to draw attention to this, to bring new resources and new innovations. So we're very excited about that. So on Facebook, doing Facebook Live discussions. And the idea is on this right side, you see the initial page of this, a draft of this online campaign, where if you sign up, you'll be able to voice your support for these issues, and that you'll enter your zip code, your zip code, and you'll have automatically, it'll be sent to your particular elected officials. So countywide, wherever you are, you'll be able to do that. The idea is to sustain attention on these issues and to say, people care about this. We are watching. We want you to act and continue to collaborate and find solutions. It's also an opportunity to have the attention on any new clusters that might emerge or any new opportunities that might emerge. There might be some rural areas where folks cluster. I'm thinking about agricultural workers, that if there's something that happens there, we want to have this campaign up and running to be able to deploy resources quickly. And we're looking to partner with like-minded officials and candidates, really, to be honest, to see how we can find mutual support. And what does that look like short-term, mid-range term, and long-term? That's really it. I know it was a lot of stuff to cover. I'm happy to go back to a slide, but we wanted to make sure that we had time to open it up to discussions with folks. So with that, I'll hand it back to Saga.
Yes, thank you, Ricardo. We are going to be having time for a Q&A, but I also want to provide Kate some space if she would like to speak on this. Kate?
Thank you, Saga. Yes, just very quick, because I agree with Ricardo and Omar. Part of this is the new discussion format, right? Having all 60 of us in this room, but really having the opportunity to ask questions and get answers. Agree 100% with Omar that the issues that have been brought forward by COVID were systemic and they've been underlying in our community for a long time. And having this call to action is overdue, and having a task force come together and to look at some of these foundation or systemic issues is absolutely appropriate. And I am so grateful to Omar and the leadership that he continues to show, working with our community partners, working with the city, working with the county, to be in collaboration and in conversation. This is what we're talking about is not going to be solved by one entity. It cannot just be solved by the city. And Canal Alliance recognizes that. It's going to be through working together. And any solution or any program absolutely has to include the voices of the people that are affected most. And that, again, is what Canal Alliance, Multicultural Center Marin are able to bring to the conversation. The only other kind of bigger contextual things I wanted to just state, this was very, very specific, but just since we have 60 people on the call, the state of California issued new health guidelines last Friday. They're more clear. There are fewer indicators, but they're more targeted. So I think that will enable us as a county and as a city to continue to react and evolve as the conditions change in San Rafael. In the other part of all this, we, again, very health focused and equity focused, talking about our students. And I have to give a shout out to Micah Gulati, who, Saga, you mentioned, she's actually is going to be the new councilwoman for District 1. I'm thrilled. I know she's on the call, and she will bring her school board hat. The school piece, the education piece is so key to ensuring that our students have what they need to succeed. And one way that the city's really been stepping up, and all credit is due to the staff and our tech department, is ensuring that students have access to both the Chromebooks, working with the schools, as well as to the Wi-Fi. And I just got an email this morning saying that there are now posters going up about how residents in the canal can access free Wi-Fi. So again, there's so many different layers to this conversation, and I know that our partners understand that. And I look forward to being part of the collaborative process. So with that, I'm happy to be a part of this discussion going forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kate, Omar, and Ricardo. So now we can open up to questions. I would just say, if you do ask a question, please refer to the person who you're asking, so that way they can answer. But with that being said, yeah, let's open the room for discussion. Anyone wants to start with a question, you can either type it, or you can unmute yourself and ask it to either Ricardo, Omar, or Kate.
Hi, may I go ahead and ask my question?
Go for it.
Fantastic. Miguel Gabaldon, Marin Community Foundation. Thank you for your presentation, all of you, and your hard work. Ricardo, a question for you. I appreciated the quote, distribute the pain equitably. What is the coalition's plan for measuring the equitable distribution of pain? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we have a plan. We're not quite there yet. I think it's still we're in an initial phase to figure out, the willingness of. It's one thing to say yes, we support it, which that's what we got from the mayor and from other elected officials. It's another thing to figure out where those resources are going to come from and how they're going to be deployed and how they're going to be managed. That idea, I think, is kind of a guiding aspirational value. And it's also kind of an analytical framework to say, one example, there may be a small property owner who has a couple of units somewhere in an apartment building, a few units, and that property might be fully paid off. And so that's a very different experience for somebody who owns a couple of properties, but their property is not paid off. And so they're looking at issues for their own mortgage. And so, that we have to unpack that and see where we can find solidarity and partnership with some of these folks to help us understand their own constituents and what their needs are. But we want to open it up through that model, through that lens, to say who's most impacted, where do we need to, it's kind of a triage approach, Miguel, to think about who needs the attention in the very, very immediate short term, you know, stopping the bleeding, if you'll allow that. And then we're moving our way, you know, up the ladder of folks who are less impacted. But to bring folks on board by saying, hey, if you got the wherewithal to withstand, we need you to take on some of this pain as well. Omar, I don't know do you agree with that? Does that sound about right?
Absolutely. I think we have to see the problem in a very more holistic view, right? So we have obviously the people that we are representing and advocating for, since they are the ones that have been the most impacted by COVID-19. And as mentioned before, they were impacted also the most before COVID-19. But we actually had to see it from a bigger perspective. And we had to go back and see what is the role of businesses in the local economy, right? I believe Kate can correct me if I'm wrong, but the sales taxes, for instance, it represents a very important funding source for the city of San Rafael and for many cities in the county. So the city really needs healthy businesses. And businesses by COVID-19 have been impacted. They cannot have the same customer base that they have had before, but the rents might not have been decreased, right? So they still maintain the same expenses and they are not able to generate the same revenue that they had. As a result of that, they had to let some employees go. So if cities don't have healthy businesses and businesses don't have healthy workers, it's a fantasy to believe that we're going to reopen the economy for a long haul. So we really need to pay attention to all of that. And when we're talking about distributing the pain, everybody has to be part of that. But as of right now, we have put the entire pressure on the one they are being impacted the most. In this case, are renters, low-income renters, and small businesses. So we really are looking at for a very comprehensive, we need to have a comprehensive response to make sure that everybody contributes to it and absorbs some of that pain so that we can actually together overcome this issue.
Great, thank you. That's a great question. Anyone else? You can either raise a hand on the reactions options at the bottom of the screen, or Jose Valera, go ahead.
I have a question with regard to the cluster and the reality of reinfection and the reality of the communication between this cohort and Dr. Willis, for example, and other health officials, because I don't think we're out of the woods based on the numbers that I'm hearing. You know, that we're still in the forest, still trying to chop away at it. And so what I'm trying to as we talk about holistic, is there a priority in the mind of the cohort with regard to health goes first, and then, you know, we will try the holistic approach? I worry when it's a broad and really, you know, inclusive response. And I appreciate the work you guys did on it, because it really does show a very grassroots inclusion of everybody who's impacted by COVID-19. But is there a priority so that the cohort is focusing its energies in order to mitigate this cluster and try to eradicate it as much as possible?
Absolutely. I think because we only identified 3 areas, those are our main priorities. There's lots of other stuff that we took off the table just to say, you know, the short term, this is what has to happen. But it doesn't matter if you're healthy if you don't have a home. It doesn't matter if you have a home if you can't pay the rent. So we figure that those are the areas that we really need to focus on. And it already builds on existing work. So we're not taking away any other, we're saying we need to shift a bit and think about innovations to be able to address this cluster in this particular location with this particular community. What do we do? What are we not doing that's resulting in these great disparities? Now, if we were at closer to the infection rate that's across the county, we wouldn't really have this kind of urgency on it, maybe, probably, right? We would be thinking about other ways of thinking about this. But because whatever we're doing is not quite working, that's the question. We're in partnership with UCSF. We're in partnership with the county public health. So all of the existing infrastructure and existing resources are there for us to work with. What we want to do is bring folks together to say, does anybody, you know, bring together new ideas and new approaches, maybe from Southern California, maybe from Oakland, maybe from that, what is working there that we can deploy locally, knowing that there's similarities, more similarities between the canal and the Mission and the Fruitvale than there might be between the canal and other Marin County cities.
And Ricardo, if I may add on to that, Kate Colin here. So with the new state indicators, part of that is actually an equity component. So the new indicators are number of cases, so straight how many people are being infected, the testing rate, what percentage of people who are testing positive, and then there is an equity component. So there's no like gaming as if counties would do that. Obviously Marin County would not, but really looking at the hardest hit areas. So the state has recognized that and have put that into place.
Vice Mayor, I just want to say that's a big point about how we're all in this together, that we don't get out of that bad rating if we don't take care of this cluster. So you know, the business community and the rental property owner community, they either recognize that or need to recognize that right away, because we're not going to get out of this unless we address these clusters and bring down our infection rate. And so it's all hands on deck. And I think that it's an opportunity to kind of funnel ideas to this leadership to deploy that much more quickly. So it's kind of like a brain trust of folks to bring the best practices immediately and to say, hey, you got to get on board, because if we don't get out of the cluster, you don't get out of that negative category. Yeah.
And I will add, Jose, I will say since day one, we have been working with the public health department and the city staff in really tackling the public health issue, right? So we started with education, distribution of masks, helping people understand the importance of getting tested regularly and all that. So we did it since day one, and we have been doing that for months. But going back to the context that was providing, these are the people that need the money to survive, right? They don't have that luxury. If you feel sick, stay home. They don't have the luxury to come and say, okay, I'm gonna work from home until I wait my results for 10 days or 2 weeks, right? So there's a lot of other factors, economic factors, that put pressure on the work that we are doing around the public health. So we can keep adding more testing, we can keep adding more education, but unless we resolve the economic burdens that people have, we're gonna fail over and over and over around the public health. And it happened to Marin just a couple months ago when we reopened the economy. The false attempt of reopening the economy, and immediately when we went back to the California watch list, and it got closed again. And it goes back to that. There are people that are saying, look, the debt accumulation that's happening in low-income communities is bigger than all of us can even understand. And people are getting into practices right now, like getting loans, you know, on the ground loans, high interest rates, selling their assets, the few assets that they have. People are desperate. And that's what we're trying to elevate. I want you to picture this, you know, if you are making $20,000 a year, and suddenly you have a $2,000, $3,000 now debt, think about how long it will take you to pay that debt. Right, and that's what for me, the policy that we're implementing around eviction moratorium evictions, it was helpful in the beginning because it was allowing us time to bring and rethink how we're going to be doing. But what ended up being is the only policy that we talk. So we just keep extending the eviction moratorium, but it's still the responsibility to pay the debt is still there. So if people are not able to go and work as they used to be, if people are not able to get access to federal programs to support that, then we really are creating, we cannot get out of that hole, right? So yes, we had to put energy in the public health, and we had to continue doing what we're doing, but at the same time, we had to start removing some of those economic burdens. Right now, Marin County is reducing the number of positive cases, right? And that's why we're gonna be all reopening the economy soon again. But at the same time, let me tell you, the participation of Latinos and the testing sites are decreasing at the same time. People are tired of getting tested. And I think there's a correlation between Marin County reducing the positive cases and also the reduction of participation of Latinos in the testing sites. So again, yes, we cannot lose that energy in the public health, but we had to start adding these other components to the conversation.
No, thank you. We have a couple questions going on right now, so I would like to just address that if you have a question, we see you in the raised hands. We're going to get to it. Thank you so much for those who are commenting in the bottom in the chat. We do have a question around, this is a little bit for all the panelists, around your insights regarding equity and environmental justice issues that are affecting Latino childcare workers, especially now that schools are back in session and the wildfires and the heat wave are not making it easier for a lot of our families. We'd love to kind of hear your thoughts around those pieces. Thank you.
I can start just with some general thoughts and then, bring Ricardo and Kate's thoughts on that. There are groups that are being impacted differently, and some of them more than others, depending on what the role that you were playing in the economy and before COVID-19. And I was just gonna go back to the childcare business, because many of those services were provided by women. They're not even recognized as a business, right? So when we are thinking about providing support to businesses to reopen safely and all that, we're not even thinking about the person who is cleaning someone's house or the person who is taking care of someone's kids. We're not even providing any technical assistance to them, right? In fact, Latino-owned businesses are not receiving any technical assistance from anyone in the county, right? So you see a lot of disparities among even our effort to reopen the economy. So there are people that are being affected the most, in our community, and we have to recognize that. So I do believe that we had to do more, and that's where the allocation of resources is key, because we need to think, what is the role of Chamber of Commerce in supporting Latino-owned businesses or self-employed individuals who would not even consider a business inside this equation, right? And then really looking at people that were performing jobs that due to COVID-19, those jobs might not even come back again. So what is our strategy? What is our plan to help those individuals to connect with different careers that perhaps COVID-19 has created for us? We need to have that conversation. We cannot just expect that the world is going to go back to before COVID-19. I think we need to embrace it, that the world has changed, and we need to build a new economy. But let's build it a more just economy that create opportunities for people to connect with jobs that actually are going to pay enough to live with dignity in this county.
Thank you, Omar. Kate, Colin, I will just add on. There are actually people on this call that I can see that are part of the Marin Economic Recovery Committee that the county has been putting together with chamber involvement. I see Miriam's here with Small Business Association. So part of that recovery is making sure that all businesses are being talked to. And you mentioned something that really resonated with me. I do know that the city of San Rafael, we did have a bilingual employee that actually went out to, I think she contacted all the business owners that have retail fronts or brick and mortar in the Canal neighborhood, knocked on their door and had a conversation really around safe health practices, around if there's gonna be enforcement, really getting in conversation. And it reminds me that it's not just a bunch of emails, it's not just a bunch of flyers, it's actually that last step of having the conversation. And so whatever barriers are there, that they can be addressed in conversation. And so I know the city has already done that once, but to your point, Omar, it needs to be done over and over as people start to either modify their business or pivot it to have that really hands-on support. In the Canal especially, really actually all our business owners throughout San Rafael and Marin County. So absolutely hear that. It's an ongoing conversation too. It's not oh, we gave them the information, we're done. It's how do we react now that we're going inside when it starts to rain? What are we gonna do then?
No, thank you for that. Yavar, you had a question. Please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I hope it's not too loud in the location where I'm at. So I'm just here representing ICE out of Marin, a grassroots advocacy organization for immigrant justice. I appreciate everyone here who's given us all of this important information and the updates and all of the work that people are doing on the ground in these communities. It's just so appreciated and respected. So I'm just here to uplift that we're struggling for a sanctuary county ordinance for multiple years. We're hoping that we can get it over the line. We understand this is something that will benefit Muslim communities, Latinx communities, African immigrant communities, so many different communities in Marin County. But just specifically, I want to ask, because a lot of our opposition, a lot of people say that, well, that's symbolic, and what will it actually accomplish? And we understand that a sanctuary county ordinance will do a lot in creating trust between county officials, public health officials, and these communities that we're talking about. And it's been proven in other locations in California. It's been proven now in Humboldt, which is, it's a measure, a ballot measure, but it's still a sanctuary county, and they've had a much different response to COVID-19, at least in the numbers in their Latinx community. So my question is really, would we benefit? Would we, as a whole in Marin County, and then specifically, would Marin County's Latinx community benefit on the COVID-19 issue from Marin becoming a sanctuary county, and hopefully some harm reduction and fighting this palpable fear that has been created by so many different policies, whether it's federal, state, local, that I can't go through all of them, but this fear that prevents people from really getting what they're due, really getting the services that are available to them. So I won't go on too long. I hope my question is clear. Thank you.
I can start, and then, Ricardo and Kate, feel free to join. First of all, thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. I would say the short answer to your question is yes, we will all benefit from that. In fact, Canal Alliance has been advocating for that since the beginning of this nightmare that we're living right now. Right after when Trump became president, we just started advocating for it. Now, my question that I ask myself, in the current situation that I am, and seeing how the federal government is responding to sanctuary counties, sanctuary cities, as we get closer to the elections, right? We have seen how the federal government has changed, and the criminalization and persecution of immigrants has increased. In fact, everybody thought the COVID-19 perhaps is going to slow down the deportation of immigrants, and that has not changed. In fact, has continued increasing. And they are utilizing techniques that we have not seen before. And we have seen what happened in Oregon, using the ICE arm to go and criminalize protesters and everyone else. So I am concerned if we, at this point, if you ask me if our supervisors were considering adopting a sanctuary making a Marin County sanctuary place early on when this nightmare started, yes, 100% without a doubt, let's do it. But the reality is the sanctuary statement doesn't prevent for ICE to come to the county. So we really need to work with local law enforcement to make sure that their policies are aligned with the principles of the values of a sanctuary county. And I felt that there was not clear understanding for the supervisors at the time, what was their capacity to influence the sheriff in this case to make sure that that happened. So it was not clear to me in the beginning, it's still not clear now. Now, if we advocate for a sanctuary county with a set of policies that we just described, Ricardo put in this slide, yes, sign me in, and I will be the first one in the supervisor's chamber advocating for it. But right now, I am concerned about how complex the issue is, and COVID-19 has made it more complicated. So if you actually go to those low-income communities and you ask them in the top 3 priorities, what is the number one thing that the number 3 things that they need to do, having a sanctuary county might not be the top 3. It's really paying the rent, being able to buy medicines and not getting sick. So it's a complicated. So my short answer is yes. The longer answer is more complicated because we really need to understand what it means and what that potentially can translate for undocumented communities under sanctuary counties or cities.
I think I would just add, and I do thank you, Yavar, for that question. It goes back to what Jose asked, right? Is there room for this other stuff? And all of it seems very urgent, and it's true, and I don't want to take away from that. And yet, as Omar just described, we got to start somewhere, and the feedback that we got is these are the areas to start. I would say we are envisioning this as just the beginning point. It really is just what's happening in the short term. But by building this collaborative and by building a cooperative vision and seeing the results and how quickly we can mobilize our collaboration, I think we can begin to think about then, okay, so we're working on these three, you know, spin those plates, let's put on a few other plates and start working on those together. And I think it really was remarkable to me as an outsider to see how quickly not only the collaborative came together and the various folks that came together in support, but the elected officials, Marin being, you know, progressive in many ways, seem ready and primed and much more than other places. So I want to make so yes, exactly what Omar said. I also want to say before I forget, I don't know how much time we have left, but it is a call to action, it is a call to opportunity, so that as individuals, please join us, please sign on, please join the campaign. As organizations, the ones you're representing here today or others that you know of, we're also welcoming more signatories to the letter, just to show like there's a wide support of voting folks, of mobilizing folks that are in support of this particular approach. And as we move from the short term to the midterm to the long term strategies, we'd like to bring that along. So there's lots of questions that I'm seeing, and the question about environmental justice, again, it's not part of the three necessarily, but it is part of what we're thinking about for the neighborhood specific plan that we hope will inform other communities about like priorities. So emergency preparedness, sea level rise, the wildfires, both the smoke and the actual fires. So all of that is going to be part of that planning for the neighborhood plan, but we're wanting to develop the research and the communications, the educational piece, to distribute that much more widely. So just because it's a neighborhood plan for Canal doesn't mean it's going to be limited, but we want to, and through this collaborative, we're hoping that that's the case. So please join us, and please, you know, bring these issues and your expertise on them to help us strategize about how do we prioritize, how do we build strategic campaigns and agendas, what can work now, what needs to wait. So all of that, it's not just Omar and myself devising that, it's really this collaborative brain trust that's figuring out priorities and approaches.
Awesome, thank you for that. Marjorie, feel free to go ahead and ask your question. And after that, N. Fernandez. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for this meeting, for the collective of the minds. And I want to say to Yavar, Assalamu alaikum. I have heard your many comments at the Board of Soups in regards to ISAT and Marin, and I fully support that, just as I fully support backing this letter and this particular campaign. I do see the importance of the three factors that you are all pointing to. I'd like to ask a follow-up for the business sector of this. I remember Omar had talked about hotels and possible other Airbnb or even grassroots organizing our wealthy Marin County residents who may have an extra residential space or additional dwelling unit that could be used to house people in case they need to quarantine by themselves. Can you talk a little bit about some of that movement and how we can maybe look to push either as individuals or collectively with our organizations on how to move that needle forward, please?
Sure. I would say that one of the major failures the Marin had, it was the isolation strategy, right? We did a great job educating people. Actually, if you came in, around March, April in the canal, I think was one of the areas where people wear more masks than any other neighborhoods. So we did a very good job of that. But then when we moved to the testing and the isolation, we failed. And I will say I have been working very close with the public health department and their teams in changing that. And one of them, it was the fact that we have one hotel that was located in Novato. And it was really creating a sense of separation, right? So people saying like, look, you're gonna be needed to be isolated, and now we're gonna be sending you all the way to Novato. And I did raise the question at that time, why we don't have a hotel in San Rafael? And I didn't know the hotels, actually the county staff actually has reached out to many of those business owners, and they have said no, they were not interested in it. Right now, I will say the county has changed now. Now they have been able to find a partner, and now we have a hotel located in the canal area, which is much better for the canal residents since they're very close to home. But unfortunately, the lack of participation of Latinos on the testing side had decreased the numbers of positive cases. So now we have contact investigators and not getting enough cases to work with. So that isolation or finding more hotels or more places to isolate people is not a problem at this point. The problem is that people are not going to get tested. And unless we change that, then this other part is not necessarily is a priority at this point. But yeah, I think we need to be considering if we are successful with testing and isolation, 20 hotel rooms are not going to make it. So we need to be thinking about what else can we do. As I mentioned, but one thing is connected to the other one. So if testing fails, the isolation strategy fails. And that's where we are right now. So I think the conversation at this point is freeze until we fix the testing participation.
Can I just note that part of the support from the Chamber of Commerce is really that it's not just going to be your advocacy groups that folks are typically hearing from around these issues, but now they're also going to hear from the Chamber of Commerce about we all have to, give a little, share the pain, as we were saying earlier, and hearing from the Chamber of Commerce and fellow business folks, asking those people to step up is going to be an additional, I would say, pressure, additional social, so that's an opportunity that we can look forward. So again, we're just at the beginning stages as far as what this looks like, and we're going to present this letter and hopefully get the green light, to move forward as we've designed. And then the next step is to bring folks together and start, making the strategies and the tools and the practices that we need to make this happen.
Awesome, thank you. Ann Fernandez, feel free to ask your question.
Yes, hi, my name is Nilda Fernandez. I am a victim advocate from the District Attorney's Office. Buenas tardes a todos. Just a comment because, I have contacted a lot of people in the San Rafael, especially in the canal, and there is a huge concern. I was in the meeting a little late, so I don't know what you guys were talking about this, but the rental assistance, a lot of people are getting letters of eviction because they didn't pay rent. I believe they only got help for 2 months, and some people didn't make it. So they are very, very concerned because they got letters of eviction already. So all I do is I send to Canal Alliance and see what I can do for them, But I think we are all as a community, we need to do something about it. And also the testing, I was talking with a lot of people and they are afraid to go to testing because if they get positive, they don't want to, tell in the workplace and say and lose their jobs as well. So there are a lot of people are in contact with people who are already, have the infection, but they don't want to get tested. So I don't know what we are going to do about it. This is definitely a concern. I don't know if you are aware of that situation also. So that is really what I wanted to make a comment about it.
Thank you. I mean, we are aware of it, and that's what my argument right now is, or my request to all of you and to our elected officials is like, unless we don't remove the economic burden from this community, the public health strategy is going to fail over and over and over, because that's just the natural feeling of survival, right? You need to feed your kids, you need to maintain your shelter, but we need to do more than just testing people or convincing them to get tested. So we have to do more, and I think both of them are very interconnected. But the other part that you mentioned, now more than ever, we need to make sure the low-income tenants have access to legal counsel. We know in the equation that whoever has the legal representation wins, right? And all the technicalities, even I think yesterday Governor Newsom extended the eviction moratorium all the way for 5 more months, right, to the end of the year. But you had to pay 25% of the rent, and then you had to communicate to your landlord. All the implementation of all those, the mechanics of all of those initiatives, it make it very hard for low-income tenants to actually take advantage of that, to protect themselves, unless we have legal counseling. I don't know that we have any representative here from Legal Aid Marin, but those guys are doing a fantastic job. And I know the county is in conversations with the cities to make sure that we embed that in the infrastructure to provide to tenants in their own cities. And I think that's the only option we have. It's really implementing policies that remove the economic burden, make sure the legal counsel is available to all tenants, and let's make sure the isolation strategy works well. So we don't have like 2, 3 chances to make this work. We lost the first one. The first battle with COVID-19, we lost it. Now we are trying to figure out, we don't even know the implications of that loss. We are trying to understand that. Now we are going to a second wave potential of COVID-19 in the fall. In addition of that, we have heat waves and we have wildfires and potential energy shutdowns. So the whole, and then we have this very political environment that makes everything more complicated. So we really have maybe one more chance to save people's lives in this. And I'm not exaggerating, I'm not being an alarmist. I'm just speaking truth based on what I'm seeing.
Yep.
Can I just add that I hope you could see the item 3 on the PowerPoint we presented. I don't know if you could see that, but that's a pretty progressive request that we're looking at to push. This is what's going to be in the letter. This is developed in partnership with Legal Aid of Marin, in partnership with other tenants' rights. So we're hoping that we get support with this. And the broader support and signatories that we get, the more political pressure that we'll have to make sure that we actually address that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. It is something that we're looking at. We're hoping for really, I mean, here's the what I mentioned to elected officials. We have the largest racial disparity. We have one of the most urgent cluster crises in the Bay Area next to the Mission and Fruitvale. So we're last, we would say. And so here's our opportunity to move from last to first by developing a model that really is at the cutting edge of what needs to happen, being a model not only for California, the rest of California and the Bay Area, but across the country. There is the possible political will locally to make that happen. There certainly is the nonprofit community organizing will to do that. So we're shooting for the stars with this, and if we have enough support from folks like you, we might be able to achieve this. So just wanted to bring that up.
No, thank you all. Going through the chat and some comments and questions that are bringing up to me. There's conversations around, where we failed in the first wave, right? And a lot of it had to do with communicating with our communities about what's going on, how to protect themselves, where they can find resources. So the question is, given of the learnings, what was in place, what was not in place, what is happening now regarding communication to the residents, not only in Canal San Rafael, but really the other Latinos in all of Marin County? If there's ideas around that, there's conversations happening around that, things that you already know about, or things that we need to start talking about. If you can address any of those pieces.
Yeah, it's a lot of movement in that, in the education side. Like any other groups, as you know, we all are impacted by the misinformation around COVID-19. I think we have a public health crisis in this country, but also we have a leadership crisis. We have a president that didn't believe in COVID-19, right? And I think that really had created a lot of the misinformation that has impacted all of us, but definitely low-income communities, because they are not connected to, they're not watching CNN, they're not watching all these corporate media channels to get information in real time. So they are relying perhaps information on what they see in social media, what they hear in the streets, and so on. So yes, I mean, the education has been key. We have been doing that since day one. I can tell you that it has been happening because I've been in the front lines. I've been in the front lines and I've been on the streets working since day one. So I know how much effort we have put in the education and the education strategy. Now, my concern is right now, even I bring more education, it goes back to the economic burden that you have. If you had to pay the rent, if you had to feed your kids, no matter how much education I tell you there is for the common good and for your own good to stay home and stay healthy or get tested, it's not going to work. Any communication strategy is not going to work unless we incorporate these other pieces to make sure that that education strategy is successful. Yes, can we educate more the community? Absolutely. Can people are walking on the streets without masks? Sure. The day laborers are not maintaining social distancing? Yes. But if you go to other neighborhoods, you will find the same thing, but we're not talking about that. When you go to Larkspur, you go to Fairfax, there's people gatherings again. So there is an issue that is impacting every single community, not just the canal. They're not understanding about social distancing, wearing masks. Yes, we can do that more, but let's not minimize what's happening in the canal just to the lack of education. We have been doing a lot of that. And I'm not saying that we should not do more. I'm saying we have to keep doing more, but only education is not going to make any difference.
I have a question with regard to the ask. A lot of times when these initiatives are put out, people say, what are you really asking for? They're large, big, aspirational concepts, but the ask usually comes down to money, right? And sometimes you really have to say, look, we need 2.5 million to get us through this light. We need this, and oftentimes when the ask is clear, the reach is available, right? In terms of sort of doing all that. And so I don't know if in this cohort that in this plan that you've got together, that you have a base budget that you believe is absolutely, potentially reachable to be able to fund some of these things and to determine, are there, either, discretionary funds within cities and counties? Are there, Marin Community Foundation sort of grants? Are there other places where this fiscal, sort of support can get there? I do worry that if so much is process of talking and writing letters, that you wind up literally debating for months before you get to the ground floor, right? Whereas if people know, look, this is what we need in order to be effective in 35 days, in 30 days, in 2 weeks. I think those kinds of things are going to be very important. And I would encourage you to look at monetizing the reality of this effort. And second, the notion of incentivizing the efforts that we need in order to get through this. For example, could we incentivize testing? In many other jurisdictions, when these kind of calamities come down, they incentivize it. They say, you get tested, we give you $10. You get tested, we give you this. Are those kinds of, really, outside the box thinking concepts, things that should be considered to sort of say this? I'll give you an example. Richmond wanted to try to get parolees and probationers to obey the laws. They started paying them $30 a day, and violent crime went down in Richmond dramatically, okay? And the cost of policing them to avoid crime was so much more costly. I'd like us to hopefully get an economist on board who can assist you in monetizing this process to a value that makes sense to the community. Because if these essential workers continue to not be tested and they continue to work in works that we know are restaurants, yard work, house cleaning, all of those, day job existent industries, they're going to be passing it on, and eventually they will pass it on to others. And if we can spread the cost to all these other communities in a way to get them to understand that by coming to this cluster, you really do help Novato, Larkspur, Corte Madera. You help everybody, because those restaurants can't be open unless this essential workforce is ready to man those places. And what you want is not just economy to come back, but a safe economy to come back. And that only comes through ensured testing and reliability of a workforce that is protecting a negative testing situation. So I know that was more comment than question, but my hope is that those kinds of outside the box ideas can really be wrestled with.
Great. Thank you, Jose. Go for it, Omar.
I would just say that definitely that's exactly what Ricardo and Chandra and Stephanie, we have been discussing about it. We don't want to create a bureaucratic task force to talk about it, about the things that need to happen. I don't know if Ricardo, you mentioned that in your presentation, but we're trying to put together a group of decision makers, people that we come and really accelerate implementation on many of our recommendations because we don't have 30 days. We don't have 60 days. Now, there are some ideas, they are more medium and long term that we need to be thinking about it. But right now, we need to do something to remove the economic burden that people have. And if you remember that the county had the rental assistance program. The people were able to submit the requests. Now, this is the people that submit the requests are the ones that knew about the program or were connected with the nonprofits that were helping them get to that program. And by May, it was over $5 million request, right? Just by May, over $5 million request. That doesn't not even represent the entire picture of the debt that exists in the county. And then we come and drop $500,000 rental assistance that goes to the property owners. Now, when we talk about property owners, I want to be very clear. I'm not talking about the mom and pop property owner that need the income to survive. We are putting in different categories there. Most of the multifamily complexes, the big ones, are owned by corporations. So we take these limited financial resources we have, limited financial resources to transfer to the hands that maybe need the least in this equation, right? So imagine if we use $500,000 to create the incentives that you talk, Jose, right? Imagine if we take that $500,000 to provide some temporarily universal income so that people can actually say, look, I want to stay home because now I'm able to pay that, right? Imagine if we take that and put some rent suspension or 3 months to help us figure out how we're gonna transfer some of those individuals to careers that exist, because many of them were performing services that are not gonna come back anymore. So I just feel that we are trapped in this false assumption that we're gonna go back to normal when the normal doesn't exist anymore. So the mental healing that all of us need to be able to shake someone's hand, to hug, even if tomorrow is the vaccine, it's gonna take us a long time to go back to what we used to be. And it's gonna be maybe a false attempt to even to try that. It's gonna be a new society, a new economy. They bring those new elements to it. So what we're asking is, and I hope that that is gonna be the response from the city and the county, we want a task force of decision makers. We don't have 3 months to do a very comprehensive economic data analysis to understand the impact to help people's lives right now. So yes, to what you're saying, there's no crazy idea, there's no welcome. We need to really think outside the box. All recommendations are coming with other attempts and look, let's do something that makes sense for everyone. But I don't want to be trapped in this place where the city is saying, well, we're waiting for the county to lead. And the county is telling us, we're waiting for the state to lead. And what I have been saying is whatever the state of California decides to do, that should be the floor. Because we as a local jurisdiction, we have power to do more on top of that. And I think that's what we are requesting. Ricardo, anything else?
Yeah, can I add? Thank you, Jose. I appreciate all of that. That's the kind of energy that is informing this process. We are at the beginning of this process. I want to emphasize and reemphasize what Omar is saying. We're asking for a policy action task force that has the authority to act now. So we're putting this wish list or guideline list. This is what community says is the priority. Let's begin there. How do we get there? You've got the authority. Once they tell us what they are able to do and willing to do, then we could come in and begin to fill in that gap from foundations, from other folks, from other partners. We just haven't had that discussion about, will we have that authority? Who's going to be on this task force to make sure that happens from the city and from the county? So it's kind of still at the very beginning. I also want to say this. I want to say that I think that this list and this approach is a wake-up call, a call to action to recognize that we're not going to get out of this. We're not going to pay our way out of this. There's not enough money to pass through for rent to get out of this. If that's the case, then we have to understand that this rent situation is a ticking time bomb that is being kind of reset. Here's another month, here's another 5 months. And if we don't dismantle that time bomb, something really bad is going to happen. And there may be counties that have enough people and enough wealth and enough whatever to recover more quickly, because of their size. I don't see that Marin has that option. I think Marin has to recognize that something really kind of innovative. I won't use the word radical, but in that sort of positive way, radical. It just has to be something very different, because when that rent is due, what are you going to do? Kick all these people out? Even the description that Omar gave of what the governor is proposing, it's really, really difficult for the population that you have in Marin County, because you have this great disparity, right? So it doesn't affect these people who have the wealth. It affects a whole bunch of people down here. Other counties have less disparity, so it kind of distributes differently. Here it's going to be all these folks at the lower end of the economic system are really just going to have no choice. So if we could get ahead of that situation in the next 5 months to be more creative and kind of document like what property owner needs help in their rent making their mortgage, what property owner really only needs help with maintenance and taxes. This is just us talking, but we are bringing in the experts and maybe folks like you who help us brainstorm about new approaches. I like the idea about paying people, you know, incentivizing it that way. How do we incentivize hotel owners to realize, hey, do you want this to be a 2-year recovery? Or do you want this to be a 6-month recovery? You want this to be a 7-year recovery? You want this to be a 3-month recovery? If you help us with the recovery for the cluster, that's going to come faster for you. I think that's a conversation that needs to be had between elected officials and hotel owners, between city leaders and state leaders and county leaders and these. So by building a collaborative that represents businesses and other folks, we're able to have different voices bring in new ideas of that. And I think the other thing is, you know, Trump apparently also is giving an eviction, creating an eviction moratorium. Like, if Trump is the floor, where do we need to be, right? If he's willing to do that, Marin can't be there. Like, that can't be the same thing that you're providing. We need to be somewhere else. We have, you know, it's a wealthy county. It's a relatively liberal county, and it's a county that really is based on the work this sector of workers. So I think, again, it's an opportunity to lend your voice and bring new ideas, but we're counting on people to be experts. So I'll say this again. The folks that did, so I'm on, you know, policy task force, the item number 3. The folks who developed this list on housing are the local housing advocate experts in partnership with legal aid. So like, we're drawing on their long-standing experience. It's not just coming out of nowhere. And they're aware of what's happening across the state and across the country to bring in best practices, what works, what hasn't worked, what could work. So we're bringing in that kind of expertise. And so all folks are welcome to join and sign on and send your ideas to us as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Ricardo. And I do want to respect everyone's time. It is 1:27. We have about 3 more minutes. I did want to leave maybe a minute or 2 for any announcements. I know, Micah, that you posted something on the chat. I don't know if you want to speak on it. We're also recording this meeting, so we are going to be able to follow up via email. But before we go, Micah, do you want to mention anything about tonight's town hall?
Sure, thank you so much for having this important meeting. I'm actually putting it on the chat again, and we have a town hall at 6 o'clock. It's going to be in Spanish with English translation, just to talk about the schools and the technology and everything we are doing right now to provide, in partnership with Canal Alliance, the city, the county, a new Wi-Fi service for free in the canal. And also we're providing Chromebooks, hotspots. We are working with Comcast Essentials. So again, if you would like to promote the event, I put in there the links for the flyer in English and also Spanish. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Micah. Anyone else? We do have about maybe a minute or 2 left. Yes.
Hi, I would like to present myself. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Samantha Ramirez. My name is Samantha Ramirez, and I'm running for the San Rafael City School Board. And I think that there's a direct connection between the issues we see in the Latinx community and the lack of representation. And so I'm going to put my website in the chat, and I would love if you can just spread the word, check out my website, because this is a really important issue. And I'm from here, so I know exactly what the students and the families are facing, and I'm really excited to give it my best shot, and I would love all of your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are getting ready to close. Miriam, one more thing.
Yeah, I would love to just let everyone know that we have a 10-session workshop in partnership with Canal Alliance that will be helping businesses get started and grow. And we will be including everything that we can to help them with everything going on in terms of COVID right now too. It's a really great workshop. It's going to be free this time. We normally have charged in the past, but given all that's going on, we're going to make it free. And I'm going to put the link in the chat. So if anyone would like to, register for that, that's how you register. And that's starting September 15th through October 15th. It's every Tuesday and Thursday from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And then again, it is 1:30. Thank you everyone who joined. Thank you to the panelists for this. One of the most important topics that we have going on right now in Marin County, but also in general, because we are all going through a pandemic. And I think, it's important to call to action to all these topics that we brought up today. This, if I didn't mention earlier, this is a series that we want to make, the Marin Latino Leaders Board wants to make. So we are going to be following up with any other calendar invites that we have in the future. Right now, we don't have a set date for the next one, but we are looking forward to that next luncheon, and we're having it either on health or education or anything that we need to be speaking on here in the county or just in general as well. So with that being said, and respecting everyone's time, thank you so much. Thank you, Kate, Omar, and Ricardo for joining us and being part of the panel. If you do have any questions, feel free to email us at our email. You have it since you have received our list or invitation. I am recording this meeting. I will be more than happy to share it. Also, the links that are being put on the chat, we've been saving those as well, so we can follow up with all of that. So with that being said, this concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone, and have a great, great Wednesday.
Thank you.